Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to explore the stories behind the research and data you bring to us. Remember the early days of the COVID lockdowns? Seems like a lifetime ago now, doesn't it?
It really does. That whole period, being stuck inside.
Yeah, the stir craziness was real. But it also pushed people in some weird directions, didn't it? Like, suddenly everyone was gardening.
Huh. Yeah, the plant nurseries couldn't keep up, and home improvement projects went wild.
Exactly. People were looking for
Yeah.
something. Control, maybe, connection.
I think so. A bit of self-reliance, a desire to connect with, well, something tangible, nature, even if just in the backyard.
Right. And that leads us to today's topic, which is maybe a less obvious outcome of all that, a big growth spurt
Yeah.
in hunting.
Really significant, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of counterintuitive, maybe.
Totally. So for this deep dive, we're looking at an article from the AHLA blog. It's called The Effect COVID Lockdowns Had on the Growth Spurt Hunting Experience. Our mission for you today is basically to unpack how this global crisis sort of accidentally breathed new life into hunting, which honestly had been fading. We'll look at why people picked it up and what it all means for, conservation and wildlife management down the line.
Sounds good. It's a fascinating story.
Okay, let's jump in. To really get this, we need to understand where hunting was before 2020.
Yeah, that context is super important because before the pandemic hit, hunting participation in the U.S., it had been going down pretty steadily, actually.
So long.
Well, the decline really picked up steam after the 1980s, so we're talking decades.
Wow. Not just a recent dip then. What was causing that slide?
It was a mix of things. A big one was just demographics. The folks who were big into hunting back in the 80s, they're getting older now.
Right, retiring from it or
Yeah, exactly. And the data shows, most hunters tend to stop buying licenses around age 65. The problem was there weren't enough younger people coming in to replace them.
a generation gap,
A
basically.
pretty significant one. And then there were broader societal shifts, too. Academics were pointing to things like more people living in cities, families getting smaller.
Less connection to that traditional rural lifestyle, maybe.
That seems to be a part of it. Some were even suggesting hunting might, eventually just fade out completely.
That sounds pretty dramatic.
Well, and the consequences were very real, especially for conservation, because fewer hunters means
Less money, right. From license fees and taxes on gear.
precisely. That's a huge funding source for wildlife agencies. So less money meant budget cuts.
Yeah.
The article mentions states having to cut back on really vital stuff programs dealing with invasive species, fighting poaching,
Right.
all because the funds just weren't there.
Okay, so that paints a picture. A long, slow decline. Serious worries about funding for wildlife.
Yeah.
It was a big concern for conservationists.
A massive concern, which makes what happened in 2020 even more surprising.
Right. Then comes the pandemic, turns everything upside down, and suddenly hunting numbers go up.
Sharply up. It was almost unbelievable, given the trend. The source actually calls it a glimmer of hope for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the USFW.
A glimmer of hope. I like that. So what drove it? Was it just people being bored during lockdown?
That was definitely part of it. People just had more time on their hands, time they could potentially spend outdoors, in the field. Opportunity knocked, you could say.
Okay, time. What else?
Well, there was also this really strong pull towards self-reliance. Remember the empty grocery store shelves?
Oh, yeah. That feeling of vulnerability.
Exactly. So
Okay.
suddenly the idea of sourcing your own food locally, becoming more self-sufficient, that gained a lot of appeal.
Hunting as a way to provide, not just recreation.
For many, yes. And alongside that, lots of people just rediscovered nature, or maybe found it for the first time, a desire to get outside, connect with something real.
So time, self-reliance, nature connection, a powerful mix.
Definitely. And the immediate effect. More hunters and also more anglers meant more money flowing into the USFW, at least for that year.
A financial shot in the arm, then. How much of a difference did it make?
It was pretty significant hunting license sales, and that includes, tags, permits, stamps. They jumped about 8% in the 2020 calculation year.
8% after decades of decline. That's huge.
It really is. And interestingly, most of that increase came from resident hunters. Sales to non-residents actually dropped quite a bit, almost 20%. Travel restrictions, probably.
Makes sense. What about other related sales?
Oh, yeah. Guns and ammo sales, they went through the roof, as the article puts it. And those sales also contribute heavily to state USFW funding through excise taxes, no matter why people bought them.
So more licenses, more gear sales.
Yeah.
A much-needed boost for conservation funding.
Absolutely. A lifeline, really, after years of shrinking budgets.
It's also interesting. The article notes that wildlife agencies were already trying new things before 2020 to get new hunters, right? Like reaching out in cities.
Yeah, they were trying to think outside the box. Advertising in urban areas, setting up tables at farmers markets, community events, trying to reach different audiences.
So maybe some of that groundwork was already laid, and the pandemic just provided the spark.
It's quite possible. Those pre-existing efforts might have made it easier for people who suddenly became interested in 2020 to actually take the plunge.
Okay, so who were these new hunters? Where were they mostly?
Geographically, the surge was concentrated. In 2020, the South and the Midwest accounted for 2/3 of all hunting licenses sold, about 15 million total.
Wow, 15 million.
And 70% of these new pandemic-era hunters were also located in that same region, South and Midwest.
Okay, and demographically, was it just more the same, or did the profile change?
There were some really interesting shifts. One big one was the increase in women participating. Over a fifth, more than 20% of these new hunters were women.
That is significant. Any particular age group?
Mostly younger women, yeah. Primarily age 25 to 44. So definitely bringing some new diversity into the fold.
That's fascinating. And what about why they were hunting? Did their motivations differ from, say, lifelong hunters?
Very much so, according to the polls mentioned in the source. For these new hunters, the #1 motivation was providing meat.
Meat first, above everything else.
Yep, highest polled motivation. Second was the thrill of the hunt. And third was communing with nature.
That's a really different order than you might expect from more traditional hunters, right?
Absolutely. Older, more established hunters often prioritize things like just spending time in nature, being with friends, maybe the tradition of it. The actual chase might not be the primary driver anymore.
So this pandemic surge brought in people with perhaps more practical or fundamental motivations. Back to basics almost.
It really seems that way, a return to hunting for sustenance, for that direct connection to where food comes from.
Interesting. And you mentioned an unexpected benefit from having all these new people out there. Something about disease tracking.
Yeah, this was a really fascinating side effect. More eyes in the field turned out to be a big help for the USFW in tracking wildlife diseases, specifically chronic wasting disease, CWD, in deer and elk.
Ah, CWD. That's like a slow motion epidemic for deer, right? Awful stuff.
It's devastating, yeah. A pandemic itself for ungulates, as the article says, and tracking it is crucial.
So how did new hunters help, especially when the human pandemic was going on?
Well, official CWD testing actually hit some snags because lab technicians and staff were affected by COVID, getting sick, or dealing with restrictions.
Oh, right. More disruptions.
Exactly. But with more hunters out there, even inexperienced ones, you suddenly had way more people observing animals. Their visual reports seeing deer that looked sick, noting locations became really valuable data points for the agencies trying to map the spread of CWD.
So these newcomers, maybe unintentionally, became citizen scientists helping track this other pandemic.
Pretty much. It shows how just having more engaged people outdoors can yield unexpected conservation advantages.
Okay, so they boosted funding and helped with disease surveillance. But getting started, how easy was it for these new folks to actually get licensed and find places to hunt?
Well, getting the required training got a lot easier, actually. That was a key factor.
How so?
Because of the lockdowns, almost every state started offering the mandatory hunter safety courses online in 2020.
Ah, instead of in-person classes.
Right. Before the pandemic, you usually had to do the skills assessment part face-to-face. Moving it online just removed a huge barrier for people stuck at home. Way more convenient.
Did that lead to more accidents, though, taking the safety course online?
That's the crucial part, no. States reported that they did not see an increase in hunting accidents despite the online shift. It suggests the online courses were effective.
That's good to hear. Okay, so training was more accessible. What about finding land to hunt on? Especially for people maybe new to it all.
That was more challenging. The article says new hunters relied most heavily on public land.
Okay, but isn't most public hunting land out west, while you said most new hunters were in the South and Midwest?
Exactly. That's the interesting mismatch. So while public land was key, it might have been crowded or harder to access for many of these newcomers east of the Mississippi.
So what else did they do?
Many also hunted on land owned by friends, or they got permission from private landowners. networking became important.
And there was pushback against closing public lands, wasn't there?
Oh, yeah, big time. A lot of lobbying happened in 2020 to keep public lands open. And a key argument was access to food, that self-reliance motivation again. Even while some states were thinking about shutting areas down because of COVID cases.
Access was a mixed bag then. Easier training, but land could be tricky. Did other problems crop up with this sudden influx? Any unexpected hang-ups, as the article might put it?
Definitely. Overcrowding was one issue. Some popular public hunting spots just got slammed with people.
Yeah, that can ruin the experience.
For sure. And unfortunately, the increase in interest didn't mean everyone followed the rules. There were concerns about illegal hunting.
Like poaching.
Yeah. The Michigan Department of Natural Resources, for instance, reported a huge jump in illegal hunting complaints.
Could that just be more people out and about noticing things, maybe misunderstanding normal activity?
They acknowledge that possibility more public free time might lead to some unfounded calls, but they also noted a real increase in reports like shots fired or shooting out of season, which are much stronger indicators of actual poaching activity.
Not good.
Wow.
So more pressure on resources, more potential for illegal activity. Any other bottlenecks?
Yes, a really practical one, meat processing.
For all the people motivated by getting meat.
Exactly. You finally get your deer, you're excited to fill the freezer, but then you find out the local butcher or meat processor is completely swamped.
They couldn't handle the surge.
Often, no. These places run on tight schedules, and they just didn't have the capacity for the sudden flood of animals coming in from all these new hunters. A real bottleneck.
Frustrating. Was there any solution?
Well, kind of a DIY solution emerged. Some areas saw people stepping up to teach others how to safely process their own game at home.
Turning a problem into a skill-building opportunity. Self-reliance again.
Exactly. Learning to butcher your own deer is a valuable skill if you plan to hunt regularly.
So this whole situation, it really shows the complexities, doesn't it? The surge was good in some ways, funding, engagement, but it also strained the system. Overcrowding, illegal activity, processing delays. It's a double-edged sword.
Absolutely. It highlights that managing growth is just as important as encouraging it, especially for something like hunting that depends on limited space and resources.
Which brings us to the big question now, looking forward.
Will it last?
Yeah. Is this surge sustainable? Was it just a pandemic blip? Or did it create a lasting shift?
That's what everyone's wondering. 2 years on from that initial surge, the article makes it clear that agencies are really focused on retention. How do we keep these 2020 hunters engaged?
Are they actively crying things?
Oh, yes. Lots of outreach programs were launched and are continuing. Some states are using targeted marketing, trying to maintain that connection with the people who started during the pandemic.
Because losing them would mean going back to that declining trend.
Precisely. The stakes are really high. The article flat out says conservation as a whole depends on it, keeping these participants involved.
Wow, that really underscores the link. It's not just about the sport itself, it's the financial engine for managing wildlife for everyone.
That's the bottom line. Hunter participation directly funds so much of the conservation work that benefits all sorts of species and habitats across the country.
Okay, so let's recap. We started with hunting in a long decline, then this totally unexpected pandemic surge, driven by, well, some pretty fundamental human needs, time, self-reliance, nature.
Right, which brought benefits like a much-needed funding boost and even help with tracking wildlife disease like CWD.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Challenges like overcrowding, illegal hunting popping up, and even just getting your deer processed became real issues.
Highlighting the need for careful management of participation.
So wrapping this up, it leaves you thinking, doesn't it?
Huh.
What does this whole episode, this unexpected revival driven by crisis, tell us about maybe our deeper priorities? That need for connection to nature, for self-sufficiency.
Yeah, when push came to shove, what did people turn to? It's pretty revealing. The big question now is, was that a lasting change in how we value the outdoors and local resources? Or just a temporary reaction? And looking ahead, you have to wonder, how might other future disruptions, whatever form they take, continue to reshape that relationship we have with the natural world?
A lot to think about there. Definitely a fascinating deep dive.